to the internet and archiving it online. So everybody knows. And the frame is here. So if you're shy or don't want to be on the internet, then you can stand there or here or sit or okay. Hi, welcome. Welcome everybody. Are you guys ready?
I think so. Yeah. I expect that people might be trickling in. So if people look like they're lagging on that side, since we're kind of blind here, if you want to motion them in and point them out and just be like, hey, what's up? That'd be great. This is the second class of our course called Project Space Industrial Complex, which is very just vaguely centered on not exactly this.
I just got a phone call too. I think it might have messed up the streaming. Let's see. Sorry.
So it's very vaguely centered on independent art spaces, but kind of how within that independent next and within that alternative next, they are then mirroring and reintroducing a lot of white supremacist tendencies in how art spaces, but also any other professionalized space ends up functioning. And so we as a group, I'm Eleanor Ford, and everyone else can introduce himself too.
My name's Carmen Dennison.
I'm Clay Johnson.
And I'm Bethany Reese.
And so we kind of got together and have been having conversations through the last so many months about. I'm gonna do this again, so for me. We've been having conversations both that are both like very personal and based on our individual experiences, but also things that are really based on theory and embrace theory as a tool for healing, and through getting through shit, like also not healing, also like picking up weapons and stuff like that. So yeah, maybe because I've been rambling. Maybe someone else can talk about where this celebration is coming from.
So today, and for those of you that read our press release, we're focusing on an essay by Andrea Smith, who is a woman who claims to be Cherokee, who is not Cherokee, but actually has some interesting points in her essay on women of color organizing, in which she outlines the three different pillars of white supremacy. And so for those of you, how many of you did actually end up reading the Andrea Smith or are familiar with the three pillars of white supremacy? And how many of you are familiar with Andrea Smith himself? Okay. So we're using that text as a point of entry into a conversation about the importance of women of color organizing and sharing space. Environments like art world settings, activists can be art world settings in particular are notoriously hostile towards women of color. So we wanted to make space for an open dialogue about issues of institutionalized white supremacy. I know that not all of you are you're bureaucrats, some of you are activists, some of you are artists, some of you are both. But open up a conversation about how to support each other and in the context of a white supremacist institution, but also to share your personal experiences and to hear personal discourses around the topic, because I'm sure you all have tough time.
Yeah, and so we sort of thought that through that and with the formal presentation of our last class, we thought we would kind of wholly reverse it and turn it into far more of an open forum that includes those of you who were invited here specifically because our experience with your work and has been really vital for us to also understand our own standpoints, and that you might be interested in contributing to the dialogue in official way, whatever that means. But also that anyone who's here as an audience member is also like incredibly welcome into engaging in a dialogue both with speakers and non-speakers and coming up and just presenting what they will on their own, and understanding the problematics of the reading that we did, pull the topic from, to understand the problematics of that aren't individual to that person, and that the function of women of color through any introspective and extrospective point of view is constantly confronted with like white supremacist pushback. That the case of Andrea Smith is only one example of that. So we were thinking that maybe one of us could start to get it kind of kicked off. And then as we go along, we can, as we go along, other people can come up and speak a little bit as well. We're doing about like 5 to 7 minutes each, but like time is kind of not of an issue here right now. At least at this exact moment. It might be later, but who knows? So, yeah. We have video call or remote. But I don't know if one of us wants to.
So in looking at this essay, and I think for those of you that were we posted the essay on Facebook as part of our invitation to this event. And Andrea Smith, in her essay on the 3 pillars of white supremacy, outlines these like 3 cultural trends that she that sit kind of at the foundation of why a fracture within communities of color. The first one is anti-blackness, essentially, the association with the black body as the definition of defining the black body as vulnerable within the context of American society. The second one is and ownable and therefore associating it with slavery and chattel slavery, which is unique to this country, of course. The second one is about indigenous people and the erasure of indigenous bodies, which is so specific to genocide and the model genocide that occurred and continues to occur in this country. And the third is heteropatriarchy, or rather Orientalism, but also all these things intersecting with heteropatriarchy, but Orientalism, the definition of what is exotic, romanticization, fetishization,
and the use of people who are like non-black, non-indigenous people being used and like militarized to inflict violence on people of color globally.
Yeah.
And also like the censorship of those identities through like census and profiling them as like white or as privilege and thus like not equitable in conversation.
Yeah. Defining them as the model minority, and having more access to white privilege, which is associated with their and so for me, there was an article that was posted in response to us posting this article that was about the fact that Andrea Smith was not herself a Cherokee woman. That she had decided to take up an identity as a woman of color and focused her entire research practice on what it meant to be an indigenous woman, and then comes to find out via DNA tests that in actuality she has 0 Cherokee heritage. And so that brings up to, and I actually say this because personally that is my tribal association. I'm Choctaw, and they've been absorbed by the Cherokee Nation. And within the Black community has a very complex relationship with the Cherokee Nation, and with what it means to be a Black Native. There's so many perspectives, but like what it means to be Black and Native. Mainly because the Cherokee Nation was like what we understand now as the Cherokee Nation is actually what was known as the Class of 5 civilized tribes. They occupied this, or they existed, or they lived in the space between Louisiana, Texas, and Florida, and so that was also like a hub for slaves. And the Cherokee Nation also happened to be slaveholders. There was a point in history of the U.S. when it became very difficult to differentiate who was Cherokee and who was Black. And for that reason, they were also forcibly removed from their homeland, which is now what we understand is like Alabama, southern Mississippi, and I think part of Louisiana as well, and moved to Indian country, which is now Oklahoma, and mixed with many different tribes and tribal identities. And so what we have now is a sort of conglomerate that is the Cherokee Nation, and which associates Cherokee-ness with the ability to identify yourself with an individual who was moved via Trail of Tears, and their name was placed on a list called the Dawes Roll. The nation has also decided to exclude free men of color, Black people, from essentially Cherokee citizenship, because based on the fact that the Dawes Roll doesn't identify them with some like native heritage. Problem being, one, Dawes Roll was a colonial and white supremacist document, which was really bent on not only controlling, dispersing native peoples, but also defining racial categories based on the one drop roll rule. So if you happen to be an African presenting person, a Black presenting person, and had Native ancestry, you were documented as a Black presenting person. So there's no way of knowing. So within the history of that tribe, there's a profound history of anti-Blackness, and profound history of erasure. And then for Smith herself, and I don't know anything about her personal history, even though she could have been told her entire life that she was Native, and then figured out through a DNA test, which also is problematic.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
That she is not a Native person, and has ostensibly been and predicated her entire scholarly practice is predicated on being a woman of color, and what that means: sexual violence and accidental bodies of women of color. The forming of identity based on the perspective of being a woman of color, which is also something that happens all the time. Not wanting to own one's white privilege and therefore saying like, well,
I'm 116.
I'm 116, 32nd Native. So I guess I'll stop talking this.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think that it's been really important for us to consider the role of this piece of writing specifically within like a pedagogical standpoint. And in as much as this piece of writing is especially vital towards teaching people who are very entrenched with white privilege about how that actually functions in a way that doesn't immediately ostracize or other them from a perspective. So there's something within Andrea Smith's identity that you can obviously then pinpoint and say, well, she's pretty good at that. I wonder why. And her white presenting identity is definitely a factor in that. But we also understand that as a function of her success within academic spaces, and a means of her own privilege over other women of color in those spaces. And especially, and these are, to me, the most important critiques of her work within this realization of her non-Cherokee heritage, is the fact that other Indigenous women have been looked over, their work has been looked over and passed over because of Andrea Smith's presence within that space. So how many spaces at conferences has Andrea Smith taken up that could have been taken up by a woman, not necessarily of the Cherokee Nation, but who is, an active scholar of color, indigenous, black, like mixed race, that could have been in that chair instead. And so to understand Andrea Smith's, the example of her as just one minute drop in a larger, like macrocosmic reality of any white woman who comes into a space who sheds her whiteness at the door the moment she is want to declare her Native American heritage, and also how that takes away from the validity of other people of color, especially Black, Southern, indigenous citizens who also want to claim their heritage, but aren't able to because of that pervasive insistence on the part of white people to then claim that like minutia, that drop. So just in terms of thoughts as to the reading, both within what it's saying and also the context of its writing.
And then also to bring it back around to the theme of this exchange, which is women of color organizing. And I find it sort of tragically ironic that Andrea Smith calls for solidarity between women of color. And not sameness, not like a sameness of experience, not a leveling of experience, but a willingness to have exchange with a sense of solidarity.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and so just within this context and kind of looping back around to our introduction of this course, it really is intended. A large conversation that we've had that's overarched this entire class has been, how do you create spaces that aren't neutralized away from those realities, but instead are reactions to those realities and the creation of autonomous zones that may be able to reverse the impact and implications of these white supremacist tendencies of academic, professionalized, artistic, just generally social spaces. And so in this context, we expect for people who maybe comment directly on the work, but also who just comment on their own experience. And the fact of women of color organizing, the importance of that is to allow for people to come to the table with what they bring both in immaterial and material ways, and to recognize these things equally. So within that spirit, we're kind of hoping to bring maybe a collective discourse to fruition. Thankfully now, thanks to streaming, it's less than immaterial, or more than immaterial. So, yeah.
That's Jasmine. Jasmine, can you hear us?
Can you hear us, Jasmine?
Yeah.
Yay! Maybe, do you think Jasmine should go?
Jasmine,
Yeah, we go.
Start.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I can start.
Cool.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
My name is Jasmine. It's from LA. And this came along with the depiction of like Black feminists in something like reality TV, and like this idea of like a scripted performing Black femme body, but also in this like idea of reality. And so I've been looking at this one clip in particular. It's one of the most iconic clips, I think, of like what I'm talking about, and that's when Tyra yells at Tiffany in America's Next Top Model, and it became a meme, it became like a GIF. It's just like this very clear clip. And so I'm really curious about all the different versions of this moment, all the different versions of Tyra screaming at this at like a tall, dark Black femme body, or how people contexted it making sense, how people contexted whose side they were on and all this other stuff. So I'm gonna orient. So the performance I'm gonna do now is based off of that work and based off of that that questioning of like this idea of like a real black woman or like a real like justified anger, and like I'm really curious about these ways that like mainstream media and pop culture defines like a contemporariness of like black feminine identity. So this piece is called the performance. We were all rooting for you. We were all rooting for you. Why? Why did the house under the frame, tall, dark, and handsome, dark and handsome, in the shadows, dark, handsome. I've never given up on that feeling myself. I've never given up on that feeling myself. There's a clip versus an hour long and versus a season longer versus a always verse something. You have to keep the body, keep them watching, keep them watching and balancing and balance. All rooting for you. I felt humiliated. I know the power. I know you feel humiliated when they were all rooting for you. Do it for your daughter. Do it. You have to get her lights turned off. For never do it for yourself. We're all rooting for you. Never always do it for someone else. Always we're all rooting for you. Your body becomes a clothing rack, a hanger for white supremacy to hold itself, to cling to your curves. And we're all resuming this reality, resuming this reality without resuming this reality. This was pre-formation. Before this was pre-eliminate. This is. Do you want to be on top? This is bottom. This is the totem pole. And so they holding a place. Your performance of that that tall, dark, and handsome. We were all rooting for you. Seeing only a clip, an extended one. There's a seven-minute version, there's a 2-minute version, and there's a GIF that plays over and over in a loop. We were all rooting for you in a loop, over and over, over and over, over and over, over and over, over and over and over, over and over, over and over, over and over, over and over. Being property, being put in your place, over and over, over and over, over and over and over. Don't you get this opportunity? Don't you see it? Don't you get it? This is your chance. This is your way out. Don't you see it? When they take your photo, they're giving you your soul back. Over and over, over and over, over and over. It's a competition. It's a competition, regular capital. Face it. It's a competition. It's a competition to keep their cultural hegemony. It's a competition. There's no correct way to win. There's no correct way to lose. There's no correct way to win. There's no correct way to lose. Over and over. Over and over and over. Over and over. Balance it. Over and over. Over and over. Over. Who owns you? Who owns you in your over and over and over, over and over. And your body's wearing something, and you know, when I put on heels, I'm finally as long as my CV. Over and over, over and over, over and over, over and over. You're gonna go home. That attitude, Miss Thing, that attitude, Miss Thing, you know, you're very beautiful. You know, you can be next one. You can be on top. You can be America's next top. You can be the next one. Over and over. Over and over. You just gotta hold it in place. Over and over. Over and over. Over and over. everybody wants it more than you. Is it worth it? Worth it? You could have won this. You could have won. We were all rooting for you. You could have won. Loving, I loved you. I only scream like this. I only scream like this. I only scream like this. I only scream like this gloss for me. Those were all for you. Can't you see yourself through talk? Can't you see yourself through her hate? Can't you see yourself through her haze lies? All she's seen. I mean, she's been to Paris. She's seen the Eiffel Tower. I'm sorry you can't say the word magenta. I'm sorry that maybe your educational system didn't teach you the word magenta. I'm sorry that you're struggling. But we're all rooting for you. I mean, you went to anger management, right? I mean, you're losing your dignity. I mean, you're in Los Angeles. I mean, your body's on camera. I mean, come on. Your body's a business, and your body's my business. Over and over, over and over, over and over and over, over and over, over and over. What if we can come together without that competition? What if she had just cried like the other girls in their loss? What if she just sat there and cried? What if over and over and over, over and over, over and over, over and over. Thank you. Woo.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. That was, I think, incredible. I don't know. We can open it up. Okay.
My life has changed.
I didn't hear you.
I said that my life has changed, which sounds like a sarcastic comment, but it is completely true.
No, thank you. That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting because the reason I wanted to do that piece is because I remember watching it live when I was younger. I think it came out. I think that episode came out when I was in high school. I remember watching it on TV and just it being such a strange moment because it definitely is. It's so rare to see two Black women talking on mainstream television, and it's not and it not being about a man. Just seeing two Black women talking on television, and that moment became so iconic because Tyra was yelling at her. Tyra was coming at her just kind of being trying to help her, trying to be and seeing her and telling her off about her attitude and the way that she was relating to losing this competition. It's so to model all these clothes, other brands and houses, and I think it's really a fascinating moment to think about the fact that the reason that she was eliminated is because she couldn't pronounce all the words that they wanted her to pronounce for this fictional television, a commercial or something like that. And I'm just so curious about all the ways that the black body has to perform over and over and over, perform our knowledge over and over and over. And I think that something very particular to being a Black woman and being a Black femme is this idea of not only performing Blackness but also having to perform perform sexuality in a very certain way, and having to look and having to deal with the intricacies of sexism in that, and I think it's something that but it's also something that as being a performance artist in LA, I hardly ever get paid for my work. I do try to do all these different avenues, but I still I'm wondering how I can survive, controlling my own body, controlling my own destiny as an artist while yeah, it's just, I think it's just this over and over effect of also just a basketball. It's always trying to shoot toward this hoop or something, over and over.
I have thoughts. Does anyone else want to respond?
I can't hear you.
Jasmine, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah, I can hear you now.
So I haven't seen the clip that you're referring to, but I can imagine having seen America's Next Top Model and those dynamics. I was thinking a little bit about Empire, oddly enough, and the relationship between Cookie, who's dark complected, and and Annika. And yes, they are fighting over a man, but they're also fighting over their shared ambitiousness. And these representations of Black women as animal in their desire to tear each other apart, and this inability to listen and know. And I've always struggled with this in terms of cinematic or any kind of representation of a Black woman. It's so seldom do you see it's always consumable Blackness. It's always a consumable.
Yeah.
A psychology that's so reduced and so simplified, and it's always expressed through in cinema. It's always expressed through aggression or anger, and there's never a meaningful discourse or a meaningful exchange that happens between two Black women. That would be too subversive for TV. And then I've actually and then in real life, the way that transfers into real life. I mean, I've definitely had the experience of being the most terrifying thing is a bunch of Black women collaborating, or if we're not trying to cut each other down, oh shit, that's way too much power in one room. And I think that, and I only say that because I have been negatively responded to in contexts where myself and another Black woman are collaborators and are bringing our work into the context of a white space, and all of a sudden it becomes we're having a dialogue, and so we're able to humanize each other, and then it makes it more difficult to map meaning onto our bodies if we're treating each other in with respect. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
That makes sense. It makes sense. It's because I think for so long there's always because it's always only one spot, on to be on top, and that's I think that's really an interesting. And we're talking about the totem pole as well, and how is based off of Blackness being at the bottom, and it being this high pillars of white supremacy, and so then people coming together, and trying to fight to destroy this system, to destroy that caste. I think that's part of why mainstream media is so obsessed with depicting images of us tearing each other apart. It's obsessed with the flavor of love, where where a majority. It's these times when I see a majority of Black women in one room in mainstream media, and in this thing called reality TV. It's usually in competition for something, something of a higher capital, a man with money, or to be American sex to be a model, all these things, and it's so much of that is linked to not wanting us to see each other, and not wanting us to see each other as collaborators, and to see us come together, create our own stuff, because that's just so something that is radical. That'd just be too much to depict or something like that. And yeah, and I think that's also the reason why I live in LA. I'm making work here. I'm a performance artist here, and I don't know of any I only know of one art space that's run by a Black woman, and it's I didn't even know. I didn't even think to reach out to her until maybe a year after I got here. It's so ingrained to me to just not even have Black women and reach out and find people to collaborate with. That was not even an impulse I had until I woke up and really started to think about it was think about all the ways that that other people wanted to use my body and my labor for free. I feel like one thing that I like to say is I make very emotionally intense laborious work. My work takes a lot out of me emotionally, not so much physically usually, but something it takes so much kind of digging inside of myself to be able to share my body in that way in front of audiences. And I think about like how different that like it looked like if I did collaborate with other Black women more, and I did find and we could come together to create something new, like together.
Right. And what kills me like about you and about the example that you can you hear me? Can you hear me? What kills me about like the example that you brought up is it's like kill each other, pick each other apart for a white audience.
Yeah,
Like, I want to watch you dance. Like, and I think that is like that internalization of the white gaze will manifest itself. I see it in a lot of contexts, but especially in the context of like public. Like the fallback public is always this white audience. Like, what would happen if we said like fuck it? Like I'm just gonna like what if I'm going to create my own space for my own audience. Like I always am. That's always the question, right? Like, what if we just like completely extract ourselves from a system that innately like encourages us to like that's like competition is like a product of white supremacy. That kind of competition, that desire for ownership, that desire for like notoriety and authorship, like that's a product of a white supremacist society. And so like. I just wonder a lot, and I think about this a lot, just in terms of like my interactions with other like black, with other women of color, with other like women of color who are artists or activists. Like there's this undertone that's encouraging like this undercurrent or this like subtext of us cutting each other down, like kind of like proving that I'm the smartest in the room, I'm the most talented in the room, I'm like, and the criteria is always what the criteria for judgment is always white supremacist. Like you can't pronounce magenta. So I guess it's more of a comment.
Yeah. And like another thing about that clip as well is like when Tyra was voting her off, like Tyra voted 2 people off that same night. Like one was like was a white girl with like I like to think about this thing called exotic whiteness. And like exotic whiteness is you slightly forget they're white. Like that's like one of the most like you can profitable place to be in terms of white supremacy. Like and so like the other girl that was voted off that night was a white girl who like when Tyra was like just talking to her and describing her, like how she's so high fashion, like blah blah blah, like you know, just like describing like her and like, but you keep giving me the same look, like you can't just always depend on like these things. Yeah, when she was taking this thing of like of her attitude, and like you know like all these like you're a very beautiful, like you're a beautiful girl, like I know you struggled, I know you've been through it too. Like obviously like her beauty comes from her like struggle. It comes from like her like triumphing. It comes from her like the way that even Tiffany was like structured in it. It comes from her like this narrative of like her grandma like having her lights turned off so that she had enough money to buy Tiffany a bathing suit, and then Tiffany not taking advantage of it. Her not presenting herself to the fullest of her white supremacist abilities.
Right.
You know, it's like this thing of like it's just like it's so like this this way that we evaluate each other and systematize each other. It's just like so so it's so ingrained. It's so easy. You know, to just take in. Like after that, like, I feel like for me, a reason why it felt so prevalent to me this moment of like me being young and watching this is because like I have been afraid to have an attitude for so long. I've been afraid to be seen as an angry black girl. I've been afraid to kind of like have people see my inner I was like always like very like I identified a lot with being very sweet and like mild mannered and like not raising my voice. And I think a lot of that cast away from society little thing. If you're too mad, if you're too much of like too much of that like of that anger, you know, and like it's over and over and over and over again. I perform that in my body over and over and over and over and over again. Yeah.
Does anyone else?
And that's why you can watch the extended clip, because like that's animation. You can smaller clip, it's like you have to watch the whole 7 minute clip, or the whole episode, or the whole season, or don't watch any of it, just listen to the artist talk that I'm doing now.
Cool. I think that maybe if someone who like wants to step up next in terms of someone else that we've invited, I don't know if anyone feels if they're ready to go, or one of us could go. I'll sit down.
I actually pulled a reading that like relates a lot from that.
Cool. Yeah. Do you want to? You can sit in the center spot. I'm like, why am I sitting here? Also, Jasmine can hear you better from there.
Hey. Keep heading over there. So yeah, this is a writing by Chris Finley, and it is in the anthology Queer Indigenous Studies, which came out in 2011. And I'm just reading a portion of an essay called "Decolonizing the Queer Native Body and Recovering the Native Mosaic." Subtext bringing sexy back and out of Native Studies closet. And I'm gonna just start sort of midway through and get a little bit of background up until this point. She has actually mentioned the 3 pillars of white supremacy and the heteropatriarchy that Andrea Smith describes in their writings, and has foreshadowed Pocahontas as this model of indigeneity and like the indigenous like desire and the gaze of desire within that. And I'm just gonna start on the top of page 34 if you ever get the chance to read this book. That's what I'm citing. And colonialism needs heteropatriarchy to naturalize hierarchies and unequal gender relations. Without heteronormative ideas about sexuality and gender relationships, heteropatriarchy and therefore colonialism would fall apart. Yet heteropatriarchy has become so natural in many Native communities that it is internalized and institutionalized as if it were traditional. Heteropatriarchal practices in many Native communities are written into tribal law and tradition. This changes how Natives relate to one another. Native interpersonal and community relationships are affected by pressure to conform to the nuclear family and hierarchies implicit in heteropatriarchy, which in turn are internalized. The control of sexuality for Native communities and Native studies is an extension of internalized colonialism. As Foucault argues in the first volume of The History of Sexuality, simply talking about sex and having more deviant sex does not challenge power relationships produced by sexuality. Instead, the excitement of sexuality discourses readefines their power. Purposeful deconstruction of the logics of power rather than an expulsion of identity politics will help end colonial domination for Native peoples. Colonialism disciplines both Native people and non-Native people through sexuality. The logics governing Native bodies are the same logics governing non-Native people. Yet the logic of colonialism gives the colonizers power, while Native peoples are more adversely affected by these colonizing logics. The colonizers may feel bad, stressed, and repressed by self-disciplining logics of normalizing sexuality, but Native people are systematically targeted for death and erasure by these same discourses. Rihanna Green discusses the intersecting logics of race, gender, and sexuality in her work to show how unequal power relationships between colonizers show the unequal power relationship between the colonizer and colonized. And I hope you don't mind if I keep reading for a little bit, because I feel like the way that this is said, and it doesn't often get read out loud in my life is like really important for like how I base my value system, I guess. So hopefully this isn't boring for you. Let me know if it is. Just raise your hands. Green's the Pocahontas perplexed. The image of the Indian woman in American culture argues the colonial discourses represent Native women as sexually available for white men's pleasure. These images of Native women equate the Native female body with the conquest of land in the New World. In other words, conflation of the New World with the Native women's bodies present Native women as heterosexual desire for white male settlers as justifying conquest and the settlement of land by non-natives. I would like to consider this sexualization, gendering, and racialization of the land by providing a queer reading. First, the land is heterosexualized within the heteropatriarchal order through the discovery, penetration, and ownership of the land by white men. Of course, this narrative erases the fact that Native peoples were living on and owning these lands. The conflation of Native women's bodies with racialized and sexualized narratives of the land constructs it as penetratable and open to ownership through heteropatriarchal domination. Becoming critically aware of heterosexual construction of land while queering Native peoples would be a queer Indigenous studies approach to rethinking conquest, even as it would shift ideas of sovereignty, subjectivity, recognition, nationalism, and self-determination to include queer Indigenous readings of the land. And this reading in particular, and this queering of like land politics through an Indigenous lens, and I am Cree, and there is this aspect to indigeneity and tribal membership that comes with tribal sovereignty, and there's also this disconnect because a lot of the need for the documentation and the need for that is due to white supremacist ideals and eugenics, and so there's a conflict there, and describing this idea of owning land, as Chris Finley also puts it in the context of indigeneity, that is a reciprocal relationship. And that is a relationship with an ideal of a taking of 1% of resources and replenishment and mutual care and respect, and the line between inanimate and these the idea of static objects being a little bit different, and that living things might move slower or faster, but they are all around us, in that Indigenous methodology, which I really need to homogenize, but that is my understanding of my own background and my own interactions with things, albeit I also drink from the right hands. So I'm not environmentally great. But looking at the queer Indigenous structure pre-colonization and pre-genocide, and looking at how genocide is an enactment of land rape and the colonization of Indigenous peoples through penetration, and also through mixing, and then looking at these things such as the docs, or such as these lists where you do need to be listed or DNA tested to fit into that, and how all of that does play into genocide, which is beyond the amount of people who have died because of being moved to places or being put into a very small place with tribal conflicts, or the people who are currently dying on the res because there's no clean water in Canada, and the 1,200 Indigenous missing women in Canada who are now having their cases reopened, but there's no internal investigation into how the police have actually dealt with that, or the MF or the is it MFA? She was an MFA candidate in Thunder Bay who was pregnant and researching sexual slavery on boats in the bay, who then mysteriously also went missing during her thesis project, And so like in these senses, I feel like I'm rambling because I'm really, really nervous and I'm trying to like bring this back. Like that is also genocide. And so as long as like what I was feeling when I was listening to your talk and listening to these conflicts where it's where like oftentimes like in the heteropatriarchy there is so much competition between femmes for like the piece of pie or security, and like oftentimes like men and specifically white men are representative of security. And so that shifting that and like queer indigenous studies are like a very like new field and not often like there was like this whole thing, there's a whole history of like anthropologists studying this stuff through a very Euro-Western lens and in a very disgusting manner that's like not actually reflective of people's experiences and like with indigenous like methodological devices such as like participant research and like more people going into that field who are of that background, disputed or not, within academia, like there is now time and like a little bit more room for us to like talk about those stories. And I think like one thing that I've always like wanted in my communities and like from my communities, like interpersonally beyond academia and beyond like where I've studied CRT and specifically Indigenous studies is like a shared understanding of like background and like a shared understanding of like what is the problem, which we all have like individual interactions with, like as people of color, and like that solidarity and the call for solidarity is like so strong from that. And I feel like I totally forgot some points that would have tied this together like really well. Pardon me for the nervous, but like I really do love the fact that we can like sit in a room and like hopefully ramble in making some sort of sense or like hopefully I'm making sense, I guess, but like we have these opportunities to like sit in solidarity and like share these experiences and like share space and like also go into the world and like have that sense of relief from that. And that's like it's like what my community, my friendships and community look like in like my queer community and like in my friend community. And I'm very like grateful that I get to have that as I navigate these things, and like that is something that has dramatically changed for me like as I've gotten older. And I didn't really know existed beforehand. Like all I ever knew was the conflict, and like who's gonna have that like get the piece of pie, and like who do I need to be better than? But like being able to like be not in effect equal to, but like acknowledge like my own privilege, like as a passing person, and like my privileges that like are allotted by my proximity to whiteness, but also share space and like hold space for people.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did that make any sense? And so moving forward and like getting to like be here is great. But I don't know if that was even what we're saying loud.
I mean, that one thing that really stood out to me is just like in terms of my own. So like I am a Black woman, and I have mixed racial ancestry, and I realized that like my proximity to whiteness, even though like I'm very identified as a Black woman, like I am a lighter complex Black woman, and so that allowed a lot of me to as well. I also feel, I mean, blackness is of a different nature. I think like while indigeneity is like so rooted in the land, like blackness is associated with constant circulation, and like this idea that you have no land and you have nowhere to go, And it was funny. The thing that really stood out to me was talking about family structures and support structures. Like the idea of nuclear family being so founded on like whiteness and white privilege. And my father is of mixed is his mother is native descent. He is a black man. He's a dark complected black man. He comes from Louisiana, Alabama, and the family had no money. My grandmother was sick. There were no resources, and so at one point they were spread all over like the deep south, and the only point of community was the church, and I think that like it's what's so interesting about Black culture that I observed that like Black intellectualism is so constantly degraded, but like what we are so defined by is our cultural production, and I think that and the fact that like music, art, sports, and there's always like this descent for sure. Very important forms of descent. But this like the impossibility of like defining oneself on the terms of like heteronormative of like the heteronormative criteria for what community or family it is. And so like my own blackness, my own awareness, I think that like I'm constantly re-engaging. I think of blackness as being constantly emergent. I'm constantly engaging with like notions of community and notions of identity. And notions of space and ownership and family.
And like with the community piece and like with that like land piece and like perpetual displacement and that being like related to not relating that specifically, but like I don't want to like misconstrue like talking about like lack of like representation or compare that because it's a total different experience. And thank you for saying that. Like community is like the community that like through different experiences we get to have and like through like allowing those experiences to like not coexist in like an awful way, but like to be heard and have room for is like a really beautiful and like ever changing thing.
So maybe we'll open it up once again, either to comments or other presentations. It's first. I don't know. The reach space.
Did anyone else have any critiques of this article or essay rather that they read? Tara?
Well, it's overwhelming with positive feedbacks and critiques. Really, it did help me. It did put into a context something that I've been struggling with a little bit. I've been going to some Black Lives Matter PS meetings, and one of the principles under which they organize is that if you free the black femme, then you free everyone pretty much. And then they were having a conversation, or we were having a conversation about that. And then like in the back of my head, I was thinking, what about like talking to the poor? these other things. And yeah, this reading just helped put into context the different apparatuses which white supremacy can operate. And so I guess I was I'm definitely going to go back to you with this in mind. Be like, okay, I don't know, maybe, yeah. So thanks for the reading, bros.
Not having read this, but being interested in the idea of white people identifying as whatever minutia of indigeneity they have. I have that in my family, but I think that the fact that like maintaining the purity of whiteness in a family creates a environment where nobody would tell you if you had relatives that were people of color because it's unacceptable. Is in a way of erasing your connection to other specifically women of color, because that like women are what create every generation, and somebody who gave birth to whatever ancestor I have that was like from Indonesia that got kidnapped by a Dutch sailor, like I want to know more about that woman, and I want to respect her legacy, but not like appropriate it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny, something that shrouds over, especially designations of indigenous heritage, is this relatively new model of genetic testing also. And as we've spoken about, and also as is indicated by individuals' own experiences in this room, like categorization and organization end up being very large within the implementation of white supremacy in these zones. And even in appropriate and graded modes, you see that categorization and genealogical representation. The 1/16th kind of fraction that no one can necessarily calculate out, but seems to be ever present. And I think we've spoken a little bit about the ways in which that has eugenics at its core. But perhaps to extrapolate that out from a purely scientific mode, to consider women of color organizing in a larger space, and to understand how ancestral connection ends up working. I mean, Carmen, I've heard you quote multiple times, like when I enter a room, I bring my ancestors with me. Like I'm not traveling into these spaces alone. And there are white people, because white people are also bringing the ancestry of violence into those spaces as well with their own bodies. But to understand women of color organizing throughout a multi-generational stance, to me feels like a very important thing that I think the essay with Smith, but also so many other, the queer indigenous book also touches on, and this mode not so much of quantification, but of integration of many past histories into the singular and multiplicity of bodies that we're functioning in these spaces. All of that's a little bit like, my mother was a geneticist. my mother worked on a human genome project. And those interesting discussions that I have with her are her true and like powerful beliefs that like these things that she's worked her entire life on are intended for the benefit of everyone. Yet at the same points, you see that same research being used as a means to allow others to qualify themselves within these spaces.
Right.
Very violent ways.
Absolutely. Like the reality is for me, it's like I am at least 50% European descent. I will never be white ever. Nor do I want. I mean, I'm black. Like obviously, I'm a black woman, but I am of European descent. Like so many black people in this country, and we will never be able to claim that ancestry for. I mean, like yes, we can say like so and so is from France, so and so is from Spain, but like when we walk into space, we carry the label of black woman, no matter what. And I think that same the ability to put on and shed an ethnic identity and an identity is a product of white privilege. You know, like the reality, like blackness is affected, therefore it is an external duty. You don't get to choose it. Not really. I mean, you can on your own terms, but when somebody sees cops don't care how light your skin is. They don't care. I mean, like in terms of on the blackness spectrum. Like a cop doesn't care whether you're Dominican or Jamaican or from the States. Like to a racist cop, you would still just be a black person. It's not going to protect your body from the violence of policing. Whereas whiteness carries with it, physical jobs, obviously. And so that's not the ability to say, today I am. I think also when a white person tries to claim the identity of a person of color, tries to claim, nativeness, or they devalue that experience as well. And the amount of work and time that is that occurs just by being a person of color in a space that's so much labor, that's so much emotional labor. So just to steal that and to steal those experiences and those stories is pretty violent.
Yeah, when you talking to me a lot about the place-based specificity of what women of color means and what that means for non-black, non-indigenous, non-white people in the United States, and how the term person of color or woman of color can oftentimes lead to this never unpacking these non-Western systems that are also at play in which these my community and other non-black, non-indigenous, non-white communities also benefit from racism and anti-blackness and assimilation, or and the easiest way to show up for white supremacy is to be anti-black.
Right.
And just how we need to be aware and critique that we don't have these common experiences of being racialized, and we didn't have a common racialized experience, and that when we speak about colonization and decolonization, especially the ways that in which we're complicit in it as working towards imperialism, or the ways in which colonialism is different for people who did not experience it in a United States Western context.
Yeah, I think when you were talking, Karen, I was thinking about how that's a piece of it. I can hear that and say yes, but I also hear that and say no, in the sense that I have experienced. I know I myself and people I know, my own family abroad. You can choose blackness. There's a spectrum in which like you need to choose blackness instead of choosing something else, or you need to choose a particular kind of blackness. And I think, I mean, you're talking about a blackness that you can't choose, but there are many blacknesses that one must choose. And so with what you were, what's your name?
Oh, Devin.
Devin. With what you were saying now with this, you know, I mean, the caste system that we live in of white men on top, black women on bottom. So what Black Lives Matter was saying, like when you free that person and the rest will fall because it's built on that caste system, right? Like, yeah, people have arrived or people have come into that system and benefited from situating themselves within that spectrum and, you know, engaging in anti-blackness to, and since like survive in some ways or to, in what they see as survive or not even survive, but like just win. And so, I mean, yes, this, and that's my critique of the Andrea Smith thing, is like, yes, but it's just, it's a matrix of so many more complexities than those easy like 2 subcategories of 3 pillars.
Yeah.
Right. That's my biggest thing, is like, I read it and I'm like, yeah, yes, but no, because no.
I think for me, the 3 pillars, which are presented as being like almost mutually exclusive,
Exactly.
is part of the exact categorization that you're talking about. So just like if I think about Black people, yes, we have a particular experience here around being ownable, being chattel slavery, but we also were indigenous somewhere else for a long time, right? So we have an experience of right, and there are Black people, including many Black people here in Portland, because we have a lot of Black people here who are immigrants from other countries that have been colonized, where their, you know, indigeneity has been disrupted by white colonization, right? And then we're disconnected as African Americans from our own like indigenous pathways, right? So then you end up with a space where, in the cultural production space, for example, people talk about Black cultural production as being like quintessentially American, or exclusively like the only truly American life forms. Black people made it here. Well, bullshit. The Black people made it based on a long tradition of things that we can't trace very well because it's been disconnected for us. But there's too much dichotomy, and I actually think that I think in particular it's very dangerous to imagine that colonization outside of the United States was not as violent, as genocidal, and as incredibly damaging to culture as it was here. I think that's like a very myopic view that also lends to people, you know, having imaginaries of like if we could just go to Paris, we would be some other kind of Black person. Right. If we could just be in Brazil, we would be right. Like that, those like myths of other places not having the same kinds of relationships with colonialization and anti-Blackness and slavery and all those things. So for me, it's a little too weak.
Yeah, and I think that what you're describing right now, I just had this flashback when I was a kid. We'd have like World Culture Day in like 4th grade, and we would study different countries and cultures, and I would literally make a pie chart and be like, I'm all of these things, and I would be like, well, these ones I can trace, or these ones I can't, and you know, and I can identify with those, you know, by information that's passed on to me. And so like as I got older, I was like, oh no, I'm not Scandinavian. My grandmother's Scandinavian, so I was like, oh, I don't get to be Scandinavian because I'm Black, because people look at me and I'm Black, and because I have to be Black, and I am Black. But I think that like as I've gotten older, I'm like I make anal skewers at Christmas because that's what my grandmother taught me to do. Like that's my grandmother, you know. And so it's like you don't get to take from me like the bits that I have that are my like my mother's mother in this place because of your anti-Blackness and white supremacy. Right. Yeah. So it's like, yes, I'm a Black woman, but I'm all these other things too. And I'm not saying that they're like the same or some other thing, but it's like part of I think resisting those things is like the multiplicity and just not succumbing to like easy categories in a way, which is one of my bigger things when I read it.
Yeah. I'm
on my third year, so.
I hear you, and I think like also like when you categorize someone, you are able to own them in a way, right? It's incredibly violent, and I also completely agree. There are many different ways to be Black, Absolutely. What I mean is like from the outside, in the eyes of like in like from like through a white supremacist lens, like we will experience violence, and you know white supremacist cops kill black men, black women, and trans like all the time. And so that's the kind of blackness that I'm talking about. Is that one that like is enforced by the state and is enforced by like the history of this country and of like and is informed by European colonialism and is enforced in other countries as well. Like colorism exists in other places than the United States. Anti-blackness exists in other places, obviously, but and then within that, like there you are individual with like all of the parts of you that you have every single like there's and I want to make that conflict. There is no one way to be a black person, but that violence remains consistent.
I think it's just one other point of information with what you're saying right now. So I ran into Modu Ding like around the corner from here one time, like on the street or something. And he teaches at PNCA. He's one of the only other black people that work in PNCA besides myself. And he was like, yeah, I just got stopped by a police person because like I'm a black man down the street and I'm like wearing a gold chain. And I was like, how did that go? And he's like, oh, it went really well. After like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, they realized that, I'm not from here. And it went well. I got dismissed. Like they were like, oh no, not you, right? So I think that like, that's just an anecdote I had because it happened like literally around the corner. I was thinking about it. Like, yes, there's this projection that happens, but then there's this other thing at play in how people rationalize how to like violate us.
I actually think that white supremacy is really good at that.
Yeah, it's
differentiating.
crazy.
It's crazy. Because colorism and color privilege are very, very, very real. I know that I have nothing like the experience of police that dark-skinned black people have. I know that. And that layers on class privilege and educational privilege and all of these other pieces that I'm not from here and I'm not who you think I am. And you know who I am kind of privileges that I can bring. But I also think this is it's a very that's not accidental. That's a very deliberate tactic around wedging and pitting, right? And so then if you're in an institution, for example, like a PNCA or Aisha Portland State, so in a university, there's always like the good people of color, bad people of color dichotomy, and it's just like shit like which one am I playing today? And that's all. There's there's a lot of sophistication, I think. That if we imagine blackness as a monolith, which is part of the issues that I have personally with the notion around blackness and anti-blackness as dichotomous categories, and blackness and all the other things, is we actually don't delve deeply enough into the very specific workings of power and white supremacy, which is actually, I think, very sophisticated in how it deploys violence.
Yeah, I agree. And within colorism too, like that is a deep violence. I think like the fact that like I spend a lot of time in the Caribbean. The Caribbean's profoundly. I have like seen so much profound colorism in the Caribbean, and just like there's something like I have lighter skin or these European features, and therefore I am better than. And so that separation is also incredibly violent. Like that fracture within a community is like it's as if like the we police ourselves is what I'm trying to say. Like the fact that like often the black folks have internalized whiteness to the point that like they cannot see themselves in other black folks.
I think with that, like this internalizing thing, I'm also thinking of some experiences that I've had in Northern Africa and there's other places where it's like they, are a spectrum of groups and people and races and all this kind of stuff. But there does persist. It's like anti-blackness. So when I arrive and I'm like, I'm black, and they're like, oh, don't say that or whatever. Or no, not really. I think that's one of the ways of the dichotomies that are in Andrea Smith's paper I find problematic when she's like, oh, as people of color, when we come together as victims and then we come together to victimize other people, like in the Orientalism War part, it's like and then we come together as this group to like then victimize other people, like when we sign up for the military or whatever, because that's what we got. It's hard because it's kind of like, well, if when I go, like, it's not so simple. Like, it's not so simple in the sense that, like, when I do go to the Sahara or I do go to a place and I'm like, the fact that they know generations back, I'm the descendant of African slaves already makes them look at me slightly differently. So then it's like, how can I get people to decolonize, like reconsider the ways that they're considering my own ancestry and my people to then like be solidary, because like otherwise it's like, yes, clearly it's bad that I would come with other people, any other people coming from the U.S. and come here and start a war and etc. At the same time, like, can we also talk about all the things? Can we talk about how y'all are, I don't know, it's just it's hard for me to explain. So hard to talk about. Sorry. Does that make sense? Did I say the things? Okay.
One thing that's really because I think like nationality too, like in the context of like countries in Northern Africa, and then going to say like going to visit Morocco as a American black woman, or like as an African descended person from the United States, and so like going into that context and like, yes, like you have your colonial powers and like you're dealing with you're right there's so much nuance in that, but I also think that like, and this is something that I really struggle with, is like, as a person who is a slave descended person, I really struggle with the fact that like Africa has become like this like weird invention in the colonial imaginary, like this idea like Africa, where everyone's
Africa.
Totally.
We live on Africa.
Like that, instead of like considering the fact that like Africa I think has more countries in it than any other continent that are profoundly diverse, and I guess like just to return to like the violence of reduction, and the like difficulty or just like the inefficiency, but also the importance of articulating a cultural difference.
Yeah, and I mean that like reduction in a word can happen both in that like macro sense and in that micro sense, like sense that you're describing. Yeah, in that micro sense that you said that you were experiencing at those meetings.
Yeah, it can happen in all directions.
Yeah, I'm wondering about this, like, and I hate, like, I wish that I had so many more synonyms than ontological, because it's such a shitty word in my consideration, but like the ontological category of the diaspora, even, and especially when we start to like have these discourses around people of color, and that can like that just almost expands the diaspora to this entire thing that is predicated on another as well, and predicated in certain cases and in certain like common usages on this like finalist thinking. And I'm like, the question that is coming to my mind, especially in this discussion, is like, what does it mean to organize from within a diaspora in this like means of creating through creation of a structure that maybe is acts in opposition to what a diaspora actually allows for people to do, which is to function across many different planes, but with ties to one another. That's where my mind is going in a certain way through these like lines of discussion of like the true complexity and the ability of white supremacy to adapt in this matrix-like way to any kind of alteration that that people enact in a lived experience. That's not really it's not giving much, but it's more.
I think that's a good point too, and like in terms of we're talking about like being American Black person abroad, for example, or like this desire for like a national identity within this country. And I would love to hear what other people have to say about this, but like I feel like one of like the notion of like like the like Africa, the imaginary, the invented Africa has been used to sort of like as this organizing principle in a lot of cases for like Black folks in this country, for better or worse. I'm not going to make any like judgment call about what that means, but it's so it's complicated, and I would love to hear what people think about that. You know, like Black nationalism.
It's hard.
Okay.
I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do
I mean, I am actually really interested in asking that question to people who are here, perhaps in this very room, certainly in this very city, who came here from, or parents came here from, or have an actual very specific cultural connection to an actually specific culture on the continent of Africa, and how they feel about that utilization and of by Black people of an imagined Africa. The Q line.
Gotta get going. I hope we can come back to another one.
I thought you were standing up to answer that
Thank you for having me. It's really more coming.
And thank you for your performance, by the way. Thank you for your performance. I enjoyed it.
Here, I have to.
These are the issues of technology.
Thank you for your
I can hear you.
performance.
Okay, hold on 1 second, and then.
I have a question about something I want to say as really what we were talking about. I think it's really interesting because it's like my fault was you gone, and yet my dad left early. My dad left the family pretty early, and I conceptualized my experience that in this way of kind of being let out like other African people as a Black body that does have half of their I don't knowing where and that a lot of that's not privilege, but it's I wouldn't say it's a privilege. How people relate to me, especially how the Black people relate. So Black folks in the room or other experience that or or even do the ancestry thing to that where their family's from and Africa or what that knowledge pursuit of that knowledge looks like.
Jasmine, we were having a little bit of a hard time because it was breaking up a little. Could you restate, especially the last part of that a little bit?
It's this kind of colonial vision of Africa as being this place where I wouldn't say it's where we were conceptualized as being a place where we're free or it's still I feel like example growing up people African booty scratchers that we hear in American Black folk. It's kind of like vision of Africa still primitive, I thought it was kind of all very bad white supremacy and the way that this othering. And so I'm curious about I guess question is in this where my view feel that I'm Ugandan and I'm always curious when other Black folk go on the journey of figuring out where they are from, wanting to know the lineage of their where in Africa, and
that knowledge. I'm wondering if people in the audience have like come through so back to where like lineage you're from and like what that knowledge provides and like what that knowledge does. Just curious about all conceptual like that. And really like mapping the body and like mapping one's image.
That came through. Is everyone getting a little bit of that? It's so hard.
I will admit that I have not gotten the test where you can find out what part of Africa you're from, but that I have taken the online quiz to see what school of Hogwarts I am in. And that clearly I'm Gryffindor. But no, I am Gryffindor. I will admit that. You know, I think about it. I'm like, well, what would that tell me? But then I actually start daydreaming about like white people having like a news show where they're like, and this week in white supremacy, and then I stop thinking about that because I'm like, oh, I would love it if white supremacy would like reflect on itself for the rest of us. Like that's where I'm at with that. I mean, probably tomorrow I'll be like, no, you know what? Let me go look more into that DNA test. But that's how I feel right now with Ryan Lochte on the news and all these things happening. I'm like, we need to get this under control.
Yeah.
Do you think that
Like about the American diaspora, Black folk as well. Actually, some other appropriating American Black culture, like American culture. For example, a lot of people have been like coming out to like Benny Sosa. I have friends in New York getting like I don't like the pain of not knowing like exactly where you're from and like not having like that same connection to like mysterious Africa. Like I'm wondering about that vibes or like what we're searching for, like trying to like trace like and it's something that like is happening more and more. I'm sure why.
I always wonder, like, why is it not good enough to be a slave descendant? Like, why is that not good enough? That's what I identify with myself, and whatever was in Africa 400 years ago, when my ancestors came over, or like whatever they came over, that's not there anymore. That's been gone for a long time.
But this also makes me think about this experience I had of being in a conversation with two white people who had traveled extensively in different parts of Africa and felt very passionate about their experiences there, plus a white South African, and the three of them talking about meeting Black Americans in Africa who thought they were going to find themselves there. And what a sad, silly thing it was that they thought they would find themselves there. Yeah. And my reaction was kind of like, fuck you.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck you.
Yeah, totally.
You, I really understand what people are saying and this kind of question of what do people expect to find there, but also it's like, maybe, I don't know, maybe they expect to find a place where they don't have to deal with exactly what was in that conversation with those people who were able to have a connection and just own that connection, and and then we're questioning other people's right to
absolutely
own that experience.
Yeah.
Like I like knowing that my father's Ugandan, yet also knowing that you like I don't have any connection to the place still. It's kind of just like a word and like a place in another place, you know. To me in my head and like how I conceptualize, like I can research this place and like what, but like at the same time, I kind of feel like personally, I kind of feel like like what, like my friend recently went to Ghana and like talked about how as soon as you step off the plane in Ghana, they tell you welcome home. Like they say welcome back to everyone, white, Black, Asian, everyone. Like everyone says like the flight attendants say welcome home, and like it's like I'm just like so so curious about this like concept of like Africa as home, because like for me I kind of feel like Africa left me twice, like not only like in my American culture, but like also like my father leaving our family, like this way, like my mom's from Kentucky and Louisiana, yet like I don't even really know what that means either. Like I don't know what knowing that knowledge does for me either. But it does. But they both do play a lot in like how I conceptualize my blackness. They both play like people sometimes like and then like yeah and like it's interesting when people do find out, like because I guess I think people can like see it in me or something, like black people often tell me like exotic or something. I'm like I'm so curious about like what that even like means, or like what I'm supposed to do with that, or like what even like yeah like I guess like like am I still under the gaze of just like an American black gaze, or like African gaze, or like what like yeah.
So
I guess.
Oh, you're gonna say one more thing? Sorry.
No, I'm good.
So it's funny what you said about like I'm fine being a descendant of African slaves, and like what happened 400 years ago before that in the continent. Like I don't. Like I think that like yes and no again, in the sense that like this culture of like kings and queens, and like not everybody can be not everybody was kings and queens, you know, essentially. And like but at the same time I would add, like I actually am interested in examining what people experienced then and through those times. And I'm also experienced in all kinds of people and white people, gay people doing the same thing, because like some of them are up on some like your grandparents were my slaves, and I'm like, homie, your Polish grandparents were just making a little bit more out there in the peonage system of the South. So you need to like bring it back down, and we need to get in cahoots and like retake some of this intergenerational wealth, right? Yeah. So I think that's like a re-examining that we need to have like through time and across group. But at the same time, like if we stop and say like I'm fine with just like this history that I've received in the past, like it's like however 100 years, like it stops at both like you do have something from that, and also it's still surviving and living in different pockets of the diaspora in different spots. So in Brazil, and here in the Caribbean, like you go there and certain practices have survived that may not even still live on the continent, and that's interesting. That's exciting. I like see that. No, I'm not even totally having this like dialectical theater. I'm just saying like that's what I'm thinking about. And at the same time, like we have to do that, because when people are like some Egypt, and you're like, homie, you are not Egyptian. Stop. We are not Egyptian. Yeah. It's very important to do.
Oh my gosh.
I was gonna say though, like for me is that
I mean, I assume that all black people had a experience of having either a family tree project or some kind of bringing a thing from your culture day at school where you were just like,
yeah,
right. And I think like there could be a reaction that is like, I don't care about anything that happened before. I'm going to Mima, and that's as far back as I can go. Or I want to go to this like fantasy imaginary of this romanticized like it's like one step off of Dr. Gladstone, I presume. And like I understand fully the emotional depth of wanting to step onto the continent of Africa and feel it, and yet also like, can we just do some actual investigation? Like it is possible to learn about the actual cultures that are actually present and were present and live. Right. Like we can learn actual stuff. We don't have to invent. Language. Or invent a kings and queens story, or invent a lineage that goes to Egypt and the Sphinx knows, and get like so caught up in that we're not even learning about the actual thing. And I think what I've experienced, it can be offensive. I'm just from here, so I don't speak for it. But like when I've encountered people who are actually like say from Ghana or Nigeria or wherever, they're like, why do you black Americans think that we are still like we're modern and living in cities and we have the internet and everything? So we too communicate with emojis and gifs. So that's like very weird for me. I think there to be like, why are you trying to like fantasize about this / we don't know that much about it either because none of us got to learn anything about actual stuff.
Yeah.
But we didn't, like, none of us got to learn anything about anything,
Right.
right? When you talk to like Afro-Caribbean person, as I've had many conversations where they're like, you guys are just so hung up on slavery and we don't have that problem in the country X in the Caribbean because like we run our own country. And I'm like, right. Wait, how did you get there though?
Last time I checked, you were the second most like brought to area, second to Brazil. So I know what you're saying.
I'm just like when I say I'm cool with being a slave descendant, it's like I'm cool with my family.
That's
what I'm saying.
That's
I'm
exactly what I'm saying. Yes,
I agree.
yes.
Like, and
because I was a kid that showed up in the 7th grade, and I was like, I can't do this assignment because you know,
Yes.
Right.
because the people who own my family
Yeah.
failed to keep appropriate records of me because we have family trees.
exactly.
And everyone felt
Right.
whatever.
And people don't want to do that sometimes. And
Yeah.
I totally agree with you.
And I mean, like, yeah, and yes, like, I respect, like, the history. Like, I know that something came before, but, like, as far as I'm concerned, like, I believe my grandmother over a DNA test any day. And, like, I don't need to have like, my identity defined by, like, further, like, deeper white supremacy. Like, I believe my people that are here. And, like, I'm cool learning from somebody, like, from experience. I don't need to, like, read it like I you know,
Also,
like
yes, when you get, has anyone ever gotten that in that ancestry thing? So I know some Black people who have gotten it, and you know how they label thing? It says like Ivory Coast or like it says country names. That doesn't even make any sense, people.
Yeah,
It doesn't.
Yeah. So also like
It doesn't say like house or you go. It says
Inaccurate.
colonial boundaries of countries.
yeah, actually, like to speak a little bit to like the on the ground part of that from a scientific point of view, like just for the fact that like so what that's doing is like identifying certain parts in your genetic structure and saying, well, this occurs in this many places and here you go.
Right.
But the thing is that there's been so little auditing of that through the southern United States, let alone like the Caribbean and like down through South America. It's a very siloed practice of actually, you know, auditing what genetic structure actually reflects what ethnicities, which like, by the way, on a genetic level have been proven invalid. And so
Unless you're white and you're trying to get into college.
exactly, yeah. But that is totally the thing. It's just like you see how this tool was like funded towards white supremacist eugenic needs, and then is just used as that, but in a way where it's like, well, I don't know, I just mailed my spit. And it's like, I mailed my spit and I got back Ivory Coast. And like, that's enough for me to like click, like, I don't want to answer this question for certain things. And to like get, like you said, college. Like, but like the fact that it takes on the ground work of connecting people of a scientific profession who, by the way, are extremely diverse to even more diverse populations. The fact that doesn't happen, and it kind of doesn't happen on purpose because like it's so hard to get state funding to do that, and also like that's not how those DNA testing facilities are making money. So like, why would they? Yeah.
And what about things like Liberia too? Like I do think about those types of histories and like the case of like Black folks who went back and like wreaked havoc on an indigenous, like it was like, oh well, here's this. It's kind of like what's going on in Israel right now. Like, here's this chunk of land. Like you want your birthright? Go on back to Africa. They go back to the land. They go back to what is now Liberia, and create like a very unfortunate situation with the indigenous people of that area because of the assumption that like all Black folks are the same and like naturally we want to go back to our home Africa, and so you know that process too can be like incredibly violent, like those points of like cultural intersection. I think you know just like looking at things like instead of like in good and bad terms, like you said like it's just so complicated, and there's just like and that's okay. That complexity is okay.
I think with complexity, it's worth mentioning how I have like a reaction to when I read or hear the term like person of color, not so much women of color, but people of color, person of color in certain contexts. Because a lot of times it's meant to. There are so many ways that it's employed actually against its original intention, and one of those intentions is because like a lot of times people just don't want to acknowledge Black people at all. So like I'm gonna say she was the first person of color to win the gold and it's like you're doing this unfortunate umbrella. And then also I think what happens is I think that I don't know, I'm trying to get back to this topic of women of color organizing and the term people of color, women of color. As far as I understand the history came from a group of Black women that were going to challenge, I think, a certain like report on education in the state of Texas or something, this Black Women's Caucus, and they were like, we want to go, this is Black Women's Caucus to address this. And all of their allies, across the board, all kinds of people were like, well, we want to go with you, we want to address these issues with you. And they said, well, then let's change the name to the Women of Color Caucus so that we can all go do these things together. So it comes from a very, very political, like engagement and intentionality. So then when we turn it back into a biological one, it's somewhat shit.
Yeah.
It's somewhat shit. If you're gonna use that term,
But thank you for clearing that up for me, because I'm somebody from Texas, and when I moved here, and people were like, "Oh, women of color, communities of color, you're a person of color." I was mad because in Texas, don't call me colored.
Right.
Don't.
That's another thing. Like.
Yeah. So it still hits me.
Yeah.
Wrong sometimes because I remember going home and being like, somebody call me color, and they're like, what color were they? I don't know. You know, and so then that's when you get that like, hold on, this colored or color is not like it's not okay with me. It's really not okay with me.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it's like it's hard because like, and I see this space as a step in that is like, how do we give each other homework to learn these histories and stories and to to use that term in a way that benefits us instead of one where like for example a white dude, let's say a white artist can be like, check, I talked to these people of color to do this project. Check, I talked to that group. I talked to the people I can do all these bigoted things because I've read that Andrea Smith article or whatever. You know what I mean? Like how do we use that term in an actually like empowering way and create frameworks where we actually do the things? It's I just think it's
right. I mean, I feel you too, and like as somebody who went to art school, one thing that I find really frustrating is like somebody will read like the first chapter of Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and all of a sudden they understand you as a woman of color or as a person of color, and like I think just since we are speaking of the context of the art world, I think that like our own, it's really unfortunate when when the writings of women of color, when the writings of like say Audre Lorde are leveraged against me, and like Audre Lorde like makes it possible for me to exist within academia. Right. I can look at Audre Lorde and be like finally someone that I recognize, like someone whose experience is in some way similar to my own. And I do, I mean, as people who are like, who really should be, I mean, I personally feel that it is important to advocate for other women of color because I understand like outside of this room, when you walk into a gallery space or a classroom, that like you are faced with so much profound aggression. So yeah, I mean, in short, I'm with you. In terms of like checking the people of color box, because that could be anybody, right?
Right.
Like that could be. There are so many identities that could fit under the umbrella, and God forbid you like, or God forbid directness or calling something what it is. Right. In the context of like an institution that wants to desperately to be politically correct. and meet their cultural competency goals.
Or like Don Lemon.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not even gonna go and like, I'm not gonna say the thing, but like, you know, there are people that we're currently calling people of color
Yeah.
who have not politically aligned themselves
Yeah.
enough to earn
Yeah.
the term people of color to
Yeah.
like work and benefit of these communities.
Yeah.
Who express themselves, you know, like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
And that too, like
I'm sorry. I was trying to prove a point. I was doing a pedagogical, like, we gotta find an actual example. And I said Don Lemon, but
can I say like ask a question though? Like so 410 scholars for example, says like so there is like being a black person. And then there is Black culture, which she defines as like an emancipatory project and constantly emergent and a critical posture. Like how do you like in terms of like what it means to be a black person, because they're like as we know that there's so many ways to be black, but then there is this like desire to find like uniting principle around like what it means to be black.
So you know how now everyone says unapologetically black all the time?
Uh-huh.
Like there's actually like three things. There's actually three different categories in this categorization. There's accidentally black, intentionally black, and unapologetically black. Like that's the conceptual framework there, which I think has to do with what you're talking about. Some people are phenotypically black, but they're not doing anything about it.
Mhm.
And in fact would like to access as much as possible like power structures or like draft on white supremacy to get ahead. And then there's people who are like intentionally black who are at times like strategically trying to do a thing to I don't know, what can you say, like incrementally advance or evolve structures. And then the notion of unapologetic blackness was about, I think what Spiller's talking about more is about transformation and a critical consciousness. But yeah, I mean, I think the challenge is that sort of like how now everyone is like, oh, people of color. How do you signal externally your allegiances when you are visibly connected to people, right?
Yeah.
Like, you don't have like I don't know. We should all get a matching tattoo or something.
I think
it's
interesting.
Like I chose it on purpose.
Yeah,
Make a symbol artist.
this week you're like, no, I'm going back to intentionally black. I'm not going to be unapologetically black this week. It hurt last week. I'm going back to intentionally.
Just makes sense. It hurts.
You used that term that was like a
Also,
poise or a
fancy.
black, what was it?
A posture.
Black posture.
Yeah.
I think that, I was just thinking about this today, and like this past weekend, because there are moments where I kind of can't, like, there are just moments where both like speaking different languages, like being polylingual, and then also like dialect of like region or whatever, make it so that I can't even like talk in my like informal places and in my place of work. Like I literally am just like, if I speak in this particular way, or if I hold myself in this particular way, it's presenting this idea that I've subscribed to, like this is how like black people have to start talking from this region in order to be accepted by these kinds of people. So then like I totally make up for it with just like absurdity. Like I just don't even know what to do. Like I'm just like, I don't want any of this. Like I can't do it, And then in other ways, like I am just humbled and in awe of and I don't know exactly the terminology, like the background of the terminology black posture that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like in some ways when people do black things, and I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
You've said so much with your black posture there. Like, do that. It's great.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, totally. And I mean, like, I know that like it is complicated to be black, but there's part of me like I am so proud of that history and heritage. I am proud of that posture. And like it comes out of like in this country it does come out of slavery, and it comes out of like something that like yes, like I cannot say for sure what came from the African continent. I know a lot did, but it took a different form when it got here. And it evolved into like these incredible things that I am like, I feel very privileged to be connected to. And so like that's when I think of like a posture, I think of like the civil rights movement, and I think of Denmark Vesey. I think of like Toussaint. I'm sure complicated as those histories are, and I'm like, I don't think that they were perfect at all. But I like to think of these incredible liberatory movements. I think of Marinage and many more throughout Mexico and Central South America, whose names I don't know. And like that is my history as a slave descendant. So when I think, because so much has been lost, I hear critical posture, and it's like, okay, is that what I have? Well, I'll take it. Sure.
Oh shit. I'm just sitting. I can do these explanations for like another half hour.
I mean, I think, just like off topic, like in listening to your discussions that's going on, like I do relate a lot, different experience, and like I'm not aiming for homogeneity here. But as we are talking about like these nuanced and separate and also like very individual experiences of people that are often viewed through this like homogenized lens and like projected or like manifest differently due to those nuances. Like I feel like I relate to that like in my experience as like an Indigenous woman in Canada, who like now lives in the States, and like my experience here is completely different than like my experience was in Vancouver, BC. And also my experience in Vancouver, BC as a Cree woman whose father is from Winnipeg versus like a part of the Squamish Nation in Vancouver, BC was like very different because of that. And that is this like, there are nuances like in, at least like in witnessing and like speaking to people from like different tribes. And like hearing the nuances with that, there are like so many individual experiences that often get umbrellaed into this thing, and like the checkbox of convenience is like so incredibly flawed because it fails to acknowledge any of that. And it's so important that we like are able to take the time and discuss these matters here, because I think oftentimes like even just like when we were all sitting around and talking about this class before it even happened, and like talking with somebody who like has a different experience but didn't know like that the term like half-breed was used in any other culture than like their own, and like looking at like the terminology and like how those like blood quantums or different experiences and experiences of like those conflicts are like able to manifest like to individuals, and like we can acknowledge them. Like I don't know. I think that's like transformative because there's so much like in like the like institutionalized idea of like people see on site or people see on paper. There's like I feel like the like subscription to like experiences being the same, and also that experiences like how many people are put into an institution like as people of color. Like it seems like it's like there's so few opportunities, and then those people remain separate because like if I see you and like I don't like I might not talk to you, you know what I mean, or like we're over there and like we have different desks, or like we're across the room from each other. And so like as long as like there's a separation of experiences, and like I'm not discussing things with like another Indigenous woman, or I'm not discussing my experience with like another Cree woman, then like I am just this one individual, and there's like no ability to like find any kind of solidarity and like no ability to like transform those roles within an institutional setting or within a workplace, because like as long as like as you said, like the dichotomy of like the good person of color or like the bad person of color And it's like then if I say something as a singular, then I am too political or too radical, or I sound crazy, or I don't make sense. And I feel like that's an experience that like I've heard from different people, like they can relate to or see. But like the separatist mentality, and not to like, I don't agree with homogeneity, because everyone has different backgrounds and experiences, but like by like acknowledging that and being able to like find some place to like discuss that, and like some place to like flesh that out, and like some place to like refocus on like what change can we enact, like what is like something that like what can I do like when I wake up tomorrow, or what can I do right now to like try to enact change, and like try to like create room and space, and like specifically like moving here and like not being recognized like visibly. Like people often don't recognize my like indigenous background, and like in Vancouver people do. And like here, like I mean, we've even discussed this. Like here, sometimes people do recognize it, but like oftentimes people will code me differently, and I'm not used to that, and it's really confusing. So like it's weird. I don't know. Again, like it's all question. I guess it's like statement question sort of things of like, okay, so like there are these like different experiences, and there are these like ways of like lumping together that are like super problematic. But like where does that change come in? Like how do we use these things? Like what is this like posturing? I know like in my own life I get to like posture as like somebody who cares about these things and have hard conversations and like do a lot of things that require a lot of labor a lot of times. And like I also like potentially have the choice to not do that. You know, and like in the past I probably have walked away from those conversations. You know. And so it's like it's a hard thing where it's like where is this change get to be enacted, and not by like us, but like for us, or like for me, or like for like you, or like how do we, what is something that like we can do as these things are like continually like re-solidified and like transformative, like the like homogeneity of white supremacy as something that remains fluid and like gets to change its like structural form slightly enough to like kind of like act like jello, you know, and like not really get stabbed through. I don't know. Did that? Yeah. It's like it's hard to like find the room for like change, and like that's something I struggle with because like I always feel like I could be doing more, or maybe I'm doing too much, or like maybe I'm taking up too much airtime, or maybe because people don't read me a certain way, like I should shut the fuck up, you know?
Well, it makes me honestly, it makes me think of the fact that like all an institution has to do by certain standards is bring in one person of color, black, like brown. It kind of doesn't matter in any way, and that isolation of that. I'm thinking about Jello because I'm hungry. But also just like this entry into that, and then the isolation from it. You're sealed off the moment you're in it, and that function of white supremacy too, eternally kind of. That is a way of instituting their power over that body, while also claiming the fact that like I'm not just a red Jello, I also have some pineapple chunks. And
then maybe
to use my grandmother's own Jello recipe as an example.
But they'll be like some pineapples and like some gummy bears and like maybe like a strawberry, but like there's a lot of Jello between.
You're not allowed to like then bring that to take this metaphor or across. There's so many stretches. You're not allowed to like then bring that back into those spaces. I mean like so from my perspective, and to be educated within an institutional structure also involves that as well. I'm thinking about all the people of color who attend PNCA. You know.
Well, that's what I wanted to say something, but I don't even know if it goes online anymore. What's going on here? Because it was something you said earlier, and I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Chloe.
so when that one Black person is accepted and say it's one Black person in class and this and that, like we're two Black people at PNCA who do not speak to each other.
Yeah.
I did not speak to you out of fear because everybody else had already made me feel stupid. And so if I would have spoke to you and you would have made me feel the same way, then I would have probably said, fuck this whole place. So out of fear, I did not speak to you, even though sometimes we were standing right next to each other. Then the program I was in the old building that PNCA was in, we were kept away from everybody. So then all day, all classes, is me with everybody else in the room, white. And so it's like when I would leave from there and be like, oh, okay, finally come out. If I seen, another student of color, or, whatever, it was that whole crippling effect of all day long having to prove that I am here, that I don't want to have to prove that to people who look just like me. So when we are in that setting, like when do we start allowing people who are coming after us, who are going to feel the same thing, to let them know it's okay, they're feeling just as dumb as you are. Go talk to them.
Yeah.
And so like that's how we're so easily divided within an institution.
Do you think? I mean, because I was there too.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like in those situations that are so profoundly hostile that you set up these it's these reasons for telling your ways to tell yourself that it's not that bad, or else you're not gonna make it.
Yeah, I started actually just letting people know that you'll never get me out of character. And they said, "What does that mean?" I was like, "You'll never know who I am.
Yeah,
I have to act a certain way to make you feel good."
Right. Which is isolating in art school where everybody else is free to express themselves.
Oh, I saw
Sarah
Sarah Scintillas.
Yeah.
I was like, "You'll never get me out of character." She was like, "What does that mean? You'll never get what you want."
Yeah.
And she just stared at me because that was the only way for me to be able to come back. For them to be like, "No, you should care about this." Like when I was told I should care about oppressive systems because that's what has oppressed me. Well, if you're looking at me as a representation of the oppressed, then you are the representation of the oppressor. So check yourself and your people.
Right.
So, I told her that in her class, art and work. Yep. And I was,
Whose class was this?
Sarah Scintillas.
Okay. Was that the critical theory class?
Yeah, like she taught a bunch of different classes, a lot with critical theory, but they all were focused on something, and that one happened to be art and war, or how we frame people, what is an enemy, things like that. And so, yeah, let's not talk about the ambiguity of our community when I'm the one sitting here and I'm not ambiguous. See me right now. So
there is a German woman teaching West African art history there right now.
All right. But yeah, I don't know. I think those are more things to focus on, because as we do start going more and more and realizing we're starting something where the people after us are, within our families or even within the communities we go out and serve are going to be doing that as well. It's important for them to know what they're about to face.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, to speak to that just maybe a tiny bit, it's also been hard for me to practice that in spaces that aren't confined within the walls of an institution. So even within the Portland art scene, outside of the academic institutions, it's also, how do you tell someone that you're entering into a potentially hostile space for your body as well, even to identify a gallery or a lecture hall feels more or simple than to just say hey, this community or this non-structured thing is potentially hostile. The art world as a whole, but that's fucking so much. It's you can't identify it, and therefore there's no easy thing to plaster a caution sticker on.
Well, and not to take this away from art and community as specifically as a volatile and dangerous place, looking at outside of the walls of like academia and within academia outside of art and like the grocery store. And so it's like if we're like looking at these like warnings or like trying to like caution, it's like beyond like our art community and beyond like tokenization through curation, like beyond like really shitty practices, there is hostility as well. And so it's like kind of in the sense of like, and I don't want to take words out of like mouths here, but like looking at like there's no place to like call home or like this lineage, and like looking at like the displacement that has happened to people who are migrants, displacement of like undocumented people, displacement of tribal or tribes that have been moved, like cultural ruptures that happen to people who have those direct experiences, and like ancestral hostility, as well as like the hostility of like living in a body that is tokenized in those spaces often. Then it's like, I think like sometimes I run into people who are like younger and they think like, well, I get to express this thing here, and like this is a safe space, and like safe spaces don't really exist, but like there are like ways that like those spaces can like be like safer, maybe, you know, like safer is something that like we work toward, but like
safer than the grocery store.
Yeah, it's safer than something, and like it's like putting a caution or a warning on hostility when like if you open Facebook, that is hostile. You know, like social media, news reporting, like Donald Trump is hostile. You know, it's not like it's like it's a hard thing, and I don't know like how to say that eloquently, I guess, right now. But like then it like always makes me think of like I have discussions with people about like practices that like may be like very inconsistent or inconsiderate. But then it's like, what is considerate within like something that's so mirroring? You know, like what is actually considerate? Yeah. And that exists too. Like considerate people exist. Yeah. Considerate people do exist. But then it's like, well, if we're cautioning against these hostile spaces, like it's like what isn't hostile, and like should there just be like a list of like exceptions, like, but then that's also like implying that exceptions to like being shitty is like a state of permanence, which is not. Yeah. It's like a daily process and a daily practice. It's not something that like you can like do once and forever. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Yeah, I wonder if we want to call it a little bit.
Yeah,
It's been
like,
incredible, but like also yeah. Thank everyone for coming and participating or listening or anything. Like really appreciate it a lot. And there's still mozzarella. So and thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you, Jasmine.
So life affirming and beautiful and amazing. Oh, thank you.
Amazing. See you later, man. Cool. Well, yeah. I mean, so we've been talking about doing like collective, and I specifically haven't been so good about the practice of collecting all of our texts together. But just to utilize maybe the Facebook wall of this particular event, if anyone has something that they want to put up there in terms of text that they're thinking of with this, incredible. Also like if not, totally cool. I think by the end, hopefully between this class and the next one, we're going to be putting together a PDF textbook of like a lot of different things that would be kind of fun to disseminate and reference or just let rot on your desktop, which I do a lot of. But yeah, our next class is going to be next month around the 23rd or so. I'm not good with dates.
I think it'll be the 18th.
Okay. Perfect. So, but yeah. Thank everyone for coming. Yeah. And thank Victoria.
And thank you, Mandy.
Thank you, for And yeah, feel free to eat the rest of the food, hang around and chat, smoke a cigarette outside.
I will definitely.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
If you know,
I'm actually getting too.
Also, I was staring at her like it's like from it, like to expand on
yeah. Which is like, I'm like trying to like.
That's gonna be
Incredible.
I got his face today.
I'm Allie. Oh, really nice to meet you finally. Yeah. It's like